Okay, I don't know if I'm here or not because I should be able to see a preview of this on my screen and I can't. So can someone please tell me if I'm live or not, if you can see me and if you can hear me? Hey, Barbara can see me. Can you hear me as well? It's really weird not to have the preview. I'm guessing that the lack of preview is a YouTube issue. So I'm going to go with it and hope for the best. This is very strange. I just have the comments and let's just shrink this down. Okay, so it fooled me completely because we had this happen before. And normally when I set this up and I'm going to run it, I see the box in the middle that I type stuff in, but round the outside I see a shadowy preview of the live stream before I go live, and that wasn't there, which made me think my camera wasn't working. So I came out and tried again, and this is camera number 3 that we've tried. The cameras are working, and the fact you can see me, they must be working, but for some reason it's not showing on my screen that I'm there. So I have no idea what this looks like, but hoping for the best. So thank you very much for joining me, and a big thank you for your patience while I faff around with my technical crisis. And a big thank you to the editor who has just retreated back upstairs again. And we will hope to be able to get through bits and pieces for you now. And I hope that other people will have seen the comment that I put on and be able to come and join us, because I had quite a few people waiting. And then of course I tried to start the live stream and then realized that if I started it and stopped it because I didn't think it was working, that I had to reset a whole new one. So hopefully people will come back and find us, and if they don't, then hopefully they'll be able to watch on the replay. So thank you again for joining me for this 3rd live stream in the Bits and Pieces series, where we'll be discussing 3 different topics or 4 different topics each month. And they might relate to questions from video comments, they might be issues I've come across in my work, or maybe things I've seen on social media. So if you're here but I haven't seen you yet, please say hello in the chat. I know we've already got Barbara and Mr. Piggy and Steve and Alison and Lynn. No, Lynn, you haven't missed anything other than me having a panic about cameras not working. So you've missed nothing at all other than us not being able to get this to work. And hi to Marie as well. If you're here and you're new, please say hello as well. I'd love to know who we've got watching this time. And if you're watching on the replay because you saw we were having a mix-up with the first attempt, then I do apologise for that and hope you enjoy watching the replay. So we're going to be having a look at 3 different things today. I'm going to be talking about your greyhound's weight and artificial grass, and your greyhound's attitude to toys, because Gandalf prepared a sample for me this week. So I thought that would be a good topic to look at. If you have suggestions of things you would like me to talk about, then please drop them in the chat, pop a comment on one of my videos or on a community post, and each month I'll choose some of them to talk about and look at the questions and comments as we go along. So a big shout out to those of you who are members of the channel. You know who you are. And of course, it's very easy to sign up if you're interested, and you can change your mind at any time or adjust the membership at any time. So please do have a look and see if that's something you'd be interested in doing. We do appreciate each and every one of you who have joined the channel. If you'd like to show your appreciation for the videos or for the live streams, another option is to use Super Chat or Super Thanks using that little $sign at alongside the chat option here, or on the videos they have a little $sign pop up and you can make a donation there as well if that's something you'd like to do. The guys are very happy to receive your donations. Now I think I'm kind of functioning, then as this is our third Bits and Pieces live stream, you've had a couple of sessions already in this format, then I'd love to get some feedback from you as to how you're finding it, doing 2 or 3 smaller subjects rather than the one big one that we do in hot topics. So do you like having several topics? What about the mix of topics I'm doing? How do you feel about it so far? Let me know in the comments what your feedback is on Bits and Pieces as a format for our live streams. So Marie has said, when does daylight savings start for you? I would have to look at my phone to check that out. And Maggie, please don't dig that bed. Yes, she's helping. She's rearranging the stuff. I think it might be quite soon, possibly end of March, which the last weekend of March for us is next weekend. So I think it is this weekend coming. We lose that wonderful hour, and I'm so upset when I lose my hour in bed, because of course they don't really appreciate that things have changed, and it takes us all about a month at least to get the hang of it. I always seem to just get into a nice rhythm of things, and then they either change the hour or something else happens. So I think daylight savings is next weekend, and Steve agrees with me, it's next weekend. So that will be fun. Oh, Jim just gave a big sigh. I think that might be his comment on the thought of losing an hour's sleep. It always seems particularly difficult when it goes forwards, if you've had a night up and down with various dogs all getting agitated, upset, or having bad dreams or whatever, to then lose an hour and have to get up an hour later is always very hard work, for me at least. And I've had a very busy weekend, been away to Love to Stay with our member Lynn Stevens and her 3 guys, and I've come home to discover that the editor has spent 3 nights on the sofa while I've been away, with Gandalf being very clingy and puffing hot air on his feet to wake him up in the middle of the night. So he is in desperate need of more sleep. So losing an hour is not good news. So Spamalot says, Sid has started to eat soil and grass in the fields where there's weekend football. I don't know if it's normal to eat grass in a football field, but eating grass and soil is not abnormal. I've had several that eat soil, and eating grass is not uncommon at all. Sometimes they quite like it. When Gandalf and Jim eat my bamboo grass, I do try to put them off, because it's not always very comfortable coming out the other end. It does come straight through and out the way it went in. So it's not the best thing for them. But yes, they do quite often eat grass. I'm not sure eating soil is really a very natural behavior, but I've had several that have done it, and it doesn't seem to bother them too much, other than their poo can be quite firm because it's full of soil. Yes, lots of agreement that the clocks are changing on Sunday. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I might have not remembered to change my hour. And the editor is feeling unappreciated. He's a very appreciated editor. He doesn't need to say boo. And Alison says, how many greyhounds? We had 3 with us. Nadie, the little girl, she always goes, and the elderly chap, Skip, and we also took Sam, who is the one I work with, who is now much, much better. I was very proud of him. He was amazing when it came to the other dogs. He even managed to ignore 2 dogs that had a go at him, and just ignored them, and we had a cuddle and some treats instead. So he was very brave. But overall, I think there could have been 80 plus greyhounds there. There were certainly about 80 people. I'm not sure if they all had 1 dog. Some of them had more than 1 dog. So there were a lot of greyhounds around the site, which was great to see. The editor Chan says he wants extra pizza and chocolate and a new back. Yes, the trouble with the sofa is it's not long enough. It really is not the most uncomfortable, because you've either got to stick your feet off the end over the arm of it, or you've got to stick them out into space and they get rather cold. So not the best thing to do. So to go back to the formats, I think there was a comment somewhere about the format. Barbara, I think, said something about the formats. Yes, Barbara likes both one longer format and bits and pieces for the different versions. So anyone else have any thoughts about formats? Please pop those in the comments, how you feel about the bits and pieces in general. Do let me know. I might have to dash off in a moment because I can now hear Gandalf rattling the gate, so I might have to go and come back in. The trouble with us having a bit of a camera crisis is that I've not started, settled and organised the dog, so I might have to go and get him because he is going to cause trouble unless I can persuade the others to come down and let him in for me. Lynn says, we had a lovely weekend, but it's a prime example of how being somewhere else can upset them. They nearly always sleep in until after 7, but the first 3 nights they were unsettled. First 2 nights, especially Sam. And she's very grateful to the editor for looking after the furry 5. Yes, because of course he was here with my lot. And I had a lovely walk out in the peace and quiet of the camping site with Skip at 5:30 on Friday morning. So that was my treat. And he came to see me in bed as well on Sunday morning, which was lovely because mine sleep downstairs. So I'm not used to greyhounds coming to visit me in bed. The editor is here to let Gandalf in, and then there's going to be a bit of a hoo-ha because he will want the bed that Maggie's got. So I apologise up front if there is more disturbance. But talking of Gandalf, my first subject for our bits and pieces today is skinny minis and chunky monkeys. And Gandalf is my chunky monkey, and here he comes. He's just checking out Maggie's crate now. Maintaining a good weight for greyhounds is something that often comes up. Are you going to come and say hello, Mr. Chunky Monkey? I don't know if you can see him because I can't see the screen. I can't. There is Gandalf. He's not great. He's not great, are you, mate? You're not that great. No. He's not doing very well with his back legs, bless him. He's walking around this morning. I had to wash the mats in my kitchen, and so he's walking around on the lino, and you can hear scuff, scuff, scuff as his back feet are moving, and he's dragging his toes on the lino because he's not picking his feet up properly. So, not so good, are you? Not so good, young man. No, but he manages. He does. So, people often say on social media that greyhounds are skinny. And I've heard of people being shamed for their dog being skinny, when in actual fact, they're probably a perfectly healthy weight. And it's just that the other person is used to either fluffy dogs, where you can't see how much dog is underneath all that fur, or different sorts of breeds that are much chunkier, say bull terriers, for example, who tend to be quite heavy set. So I do think people get used to seeing dogs that are a bit on the plump side, or as I say, if they have a long coat, you don't really appreciate just how small they are underneath. I know when I was a child, we had a Westie, and they don't have the thickest, fluffiest coat, but when you saw him wet, there was still a lot less dog than you were used to when he had his coat fluffed out. Keeping the greyhound, and any dog for that matter, in a healthy weight is really important long term. With a dog like Gandalf, it would be better if he weighed a bit less because he has a lot of pain in his stiff limbs. And if they have joint pain, such as arthritis or another form of joint pain, then having extra weight to carry is going to make a difference. I really can relate to this when I bring my shopping in from the car, because just carrying 2 bags of shopping adds enough weight that I can feel it in my knees in a way that I don't feel it when I'm not carrying extra bags. So you can just imagine what it would be like carrying that extra weight all the time. It really puts a lot more effort or a lot more work into the joints, which is not good. However, I don't think there should be any hard and fast rules when it comes to how many pounds they should weigh, how many kilos they should weigh. It's a very individual thing. Greyhounds are bred to perform a specific job rather than conform to breed specifications, and this does mean you get quite a wide variety in terms of their size and their build. So you could have quite a wide range of weights that are still acceptable if you look at different dogs, but they could all still be healthy. Gandalf's now knocking the table. My number 3 dog was a real skinny mini. He never managed to put any weight on. Whatever I did, however much I fed him, he just never seemed to gain weight. He was naturally skinny like some humans are. By contrast, Gandalf really is a properly chunky monkey. He's solidly built with lots of muscle, and at our last vet visit, he weighed in just shy of 40 kilos, which seems particularly heavy given that he's not that tall. He weighs nearly 4 kilos more than AJ, who is a taller dog than he is, but he is just solid muscle, whilst other greyhounds, like my number 3 dog, are very lightweight, very slim, elegant build. Not Gandalf, is a bit of a bruiser. So tell me about your greyhounds. Are they solid ones or are they skinny ones? Let me know in the chat. And I'm going to take a look at all the various comments that have been popping up while I've been talking. So do you have a skinny dog or a plump dog or a solid dog like greyhounds, like Gandalf? So going back to the format, Marie and Lynn both like the format. Marie comments about the amount of work it must be. Yes, it is quite a lot of work, but it's also interesting to research the different subjects and also to pull my thoughts together on the different subjects. So it does help me to kind of focus on exploring subjects in a bit more detail than I perhaps would have done otherwise. And I do think it's beneficial to be able to share the knowledge that I've gathered from a variety of places to help other people rather than just keep it to myself. And we got a few people saying hello to Gandalf and hi to Sheila Grayman. Hi, Sheila. Thank you for joining us. And Marie says that initially Peggy was not that heavy, I get the impression, but she got chunky and then the extra kilos cause more pain. Yeah, this can be a problem with anything to do with their skeleton. More weight is not always a good idea. And Emma is full of muscle. I had the same with our vet. I put him on the scales and he was just under 40 kilos, but the vet said she was quite happy with him. I have to say, in Gandalf's case, I allow him to be a little bit heavy. He obviously does very well on his food because I'm feeding him less than the others, but he weighs more. But if I cut his food back too much, he starts eating stuff he didn't eat. Really rather he didn't eat. And so I opt for allowing him to be a bit chunky rather than having to chase him around the garden when he's done a poo in order to get it before he does. So that is his little delightful habit. And Steve says that Manny is very tall and weighs 40.8. Gosh, that is a good weight. Is he chunky or is he just a very tall kind of guy? And Bo is 40 kilos as well. Gosh. So some of mine must be quite lightweight then, because I think Jim is only maybe 36 and AJ is 36. I'm not sure about Floppy. He's not been on the scales for nearly a year, so I wouldn't like to say he's settled at quite a reasonable weight. Lynn says that Sam and Skip are both about 35. They certainly look fine to me, so that's a good weight for them. Alison says Emma is 29. The girls do tend to weigh a bit less. They're a bit smaller, but you can get girls that are as big as the boys, and of course they're going to weigh more. And Spambalot says Sid was very skinny and you've got some weight on him now and his muscles have reduced. Yes, that is a good point. Muscle weighs more than fat. So when they've just been racing, they can actually weigh heavier on the scales, even though they might not look very large because the muscles are in certain places, like round their back legs or their bottom. And so over their ribs, there isn't necessarily very much. But if they gradually lose that muscle with time in retirement, but put on weight as fat, then you're going to get a different kind of outline, a different silhouette to the dog, and it will change their weight, which again makes it important, I think, to look at it in terms of appearance rather than just what they weigh on the scales. So we've got quite a variety going on here, between quite little ones and really quite big ones, which I think is really important to bear in mind, because greyhounds do vary so much in shape and size. Not like, say, if you've got a spaniel, it's going to be very similar to other spaniels of that type, or if you've got an Alsatian, it might be very similar to other Alsatians, and you don't tend to get that in-breed variation in the same way with most breeds, because greyhounds are bred to serve a purpose rather than to conform to a breed type. So we get this quite substantial variation. And I do pop them on the scales if we're at the vets, but that might only be once a year if I'm lucky. And otherwise, I go purely on how they look. So if we're going to look at our dog and say, yes, they're a good weight, you should be able to see the outline of the last 3 ribs, and you should be able to at least feel, if not see, the bump of the pin bones of the hips. If they're underweight, the fur is going to stand up on those pin bones and you will see more ribs. I consider that they're getting really quite skinny if my little finger will fit in the dip behind the last visible rib, because as you come back down the rib cage, you see all the ribs, and then at the end, the last one, they tend to recede at that point. And if you can get to the point your little finger will nestle in that space, to me, they are definitely underweight. I've heard people say 3 to 5 ribs. I tend to opt for being able to at least feel 3, ideally see the outline or a shadow of 3. If they're overweight, they tend to look more rounded and the ribs and hip bones will disappear. So if you consider Gandalf, although he's heavy, he doesn't seem fat and you can still see the bones in the right places. So I wouldn't consider he is overweight, even though his weight is quite high. If I need to change the weight of one of them, which is happening at the moment, then I find that I can just increase or reduce their daily food by about 1/5 or 1/4. And over a week, I would expect to see a difference. If they say get 2 cups of food a day, then take away almost 1/2 cup and you're going to see a difference, or even 1/4 cup, you might see a difference. If you don't see a difference after a week, then take away another similar amount. And if you find it quite difficult to make yourself stick to that amount, then measure out the normal amount into a container for the day and take a couple of handfuls out. And then what's left will be divided between their meals. I often have to do this as the seasons change, because as it gets warmer, I find they need less food, and in the winter when it's colder, they need more food. And as things have warmed up a bit at the moment, I am cutting them back a little bit. Jim in particular is starting to look slightly more well-rounded than I would like to see him. And so I'm preempting him getting overweight as we go into the summer by cutting him back just about maybe 1/5 or even less. He would have normally a cup for breakfast and a cup for lunch, and he's having kind of 2 finger widths less in each cup, so 1/5 less probably for breakfast and 1/5 less for lunch, to see if that stops him getting plumper. I often find I have to feed maybe 1/2 cup more in the winter than I do in the summer. It's not just about their actual meals though. Think about how many calories they might be getting in extra treats. and bits and pieces. I know a few greyhounds who get an awful lot of stuff just because when they go out on walks, they have lots of friends. They go to visit people whose houses they pass, people who look out for them. And of course, these people want to give them a treat. And it's surprising how these can add up. Even though it only seems like a whey biscuit, a couple of gravy bones, it soon adds up to quite a lot of food, certainly enough food to cause a change in their weight. I also find that they know how many things they should get and they know when they should be getting them. If this is the same with your dog, then rather than trying to miss out that snack time, it might be easier to give them smaller pieces. Mine definitely know how many things they should have, but they don't know how big they can be. And that means that I can give them 4 half gravy bones instead of 4 whole gravy bones. And as long as they have 4 pieces, they're happy. They don't seem to notice there were 4 small pieces. So cutting the treats into smaller pieces can be helpful if you need to try and give them less. Alternatively, you could change them for something that's lower in fat or lower in carbs, a healthier snack. And on that note, let me know in the comments what you consider to be your greyhound's favourite healthy snack. Let's have a look at the comments while you type that in. Let me know what is your greyhound's healthy snack that's their favourite. Hi to Aurora Violet Light, just arrived. Have you missed that Gandalf isn't well? He's not more unwell than normal. I'm just noticing it, I think, because I had to wash the mats in the kitchen because of certain floppy weed on them. And I can hear his feet scuffing. So it's reminded me that he is really not picking his feet up very well. You don't tend to hear it as much on the mats as you do on the lino. It might not be significantly worse, but I'm more aware of it today. And Floppy looks great to me. I think Floppy's doing pretty well at the moment. He is just put on a little bit. He seemed to get a bit skinny a couple of weeks ago and I've increased his food and I think he's just about come back up to what I consider to be a comfortable weight now. Bo is self-regulating. Yeah, some dogs do that. I did tend to free feed when I first got a greyhound, but of course, once you go up to 2, 3, 4, and 5, and so on, it's much harder. So now mine have very measured out meals rather than being able to self-regulate. And I find by and large, they're very enthusiastic about meal times and they wolf that food down straight away. So we have clean bowls at the end. And we've got carrots as suggestions. Carrots are definitely Floppy's favourite. I'm not sure the others would be too keen on me giving them carrots, but they also like bananas. Bananas are quite popular, as are apples. They can be quite popular. And Steve says his is like a dustbin. Yes, well, there is that. It's some of them will just, Gandalf is a dog that will just keep eating. If you gave him more, he'd eat more. It would just go down. And Floppy, I think, is the same. I definitely don't think he would self-regulate. But carrots are a good option. Fruit and veg in general is a good option. I think it is something they can still digest, but they're not going to get as much fat and protein out of it. And it's not quite such wasted calories, or it seems to me it's not quite such wasted calories as carbohydrates would be. And I am thinking that I might try and move more towards healthier snacks. I think on reflection, we get through quite a lot of biscuit-based snacks, which of course are not the healthiest thing for them. Dogs can digest carbohydrates, but it's not something that's necessarily going to be a big part of their diet, ideally. So any more comments anyone has about food and healthy snacks, let me know in the comments. I'm going to think about moving on to my next topic, which is completely different from food, but it might have some relevance to what comes out the other end. And this topic is artificial grass. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has found that greyhounds have the most incredible superpower when it comes to turning a beautifully kept lawn into a mud bath in a very short space of time. If you have a wet winter like we've been having in the UK, dealing with the muddy feet and other stuff that gets trampled into it can become an endless job. It just becomes an absolute nightmare, and the house is full of mud. If this sounds familiar, do let me know in the comments. If you have normal grass, proper grass that grows, let me know. How are you coping with that grass? And if you have artificial grass, let us know as well. So what sort of grass have you got if you have an outdoor space with grass? Just looking at the comments again, we've got a few greyhounds cropping up who like fruit and all sorts of things. And Barbara wishes she had a garden. Yes, it is much easier, I think, in many ways to have a garden. One of the issues we had this weekend with being away without an outdoor space is you're probably thinking, now, what time should we take them out? Do they need to go out for a wee? Can we leave them a bit longer? You have to start double guessing their digestive system. And yes, Alison, the temperature of the grass is one thing we're going to come on to. Artificial turf is often recommended as the solution to having a mud bath in your garden because of your dogs. And it's a solution I took now 5 years ago. And the reason for picking this subject was actually that one of my memories cropped up on Facebook showing AJ bouncing around on my newly fitted artificial grass. And that was a memory from 5 years ago. I had struggled with having 5 greyhounds tearing around in the filthy swamp that developed in my garden. I don't think it helps that we have a clay subsoil, so the drainage was really poor, and I had puddles of muddy water, so it wasn't just muddy paws, but it would splash up all over their legs and bellies as well. And with the weather as it typically is in the UK, it would just about dry out for a short time in the summer before it all started again in the autumn. And this meant that we constantly struggled with dirt coming in from the garden. Changing to artificial grass has provided a consistent surface all year round. And I do have to say that not having to mow it has been wonderful. I still have normal grass out the front, and last year I decided I would let it grow and have a bee garden. And I think I trimmed it twice, and that was all I did, because although it doesn't take very long, I have a bit of a mental block about getting round to mow the grass. It's one of those things I put off, and then of course the mower does not go very well. The artificial grass means it's much easier to get rid of the bits and pieces. I have quite a lot of trees in neighbours' gardens near me, and we get all sorts of twigs and catkins at the moment, catkins everywhere, leaves, different trees, different leaves at different times over the spring and autumn, flowers and all sorts, all landing on the grass. And I know before the artificial turf, I used to literally go round crawling, squatting on my haunches, picking up the leaves individually, because it was the only way I could get them out from the wood chips that I had before. So being able to sweep them up has been an absolute godsend. It's also much easier for picking up poop, because you can just roll it off the surface, same as you would if they pooped on a pavement. And in that respect, it was cleaner, as well as looking green and presentable, whatever the weather. A big problem, however, though, has been the smell. And I think this may be because I have a lot of dogs and only a small patch of grass. I imagine if you had a bigger piece of grass and only one dog, or even a small piece of grass and only one dog, it might not be as bad. Some of mine will pee in the yard on the hard surface, but others want to go down the garden and they want to pee on the grass. And it stinks in a way that the natural grass never stank, however messy it got. And it stinks in a way that the wood chips never stank, however messy they got. However wet and horrible, we never had this smell. And from what I've been reading about it, this is partly due to the plastic in the grass holding the smell. It's not the soil underneath, it's the actual structure of the grass is holding the smell, but it can also link to poor drainage underneath. Certainly mine in the winter gets to the point that I cannot rinse the urine away because it's already waterlogged. And the best time of year is either when it's dry in the summer or when it's actually frozen. But this winter hasn't been that cold, and this means that we haven't had that wonderful frozen stuff for very long. So why does it smell so bad? It really is quite grim. This is because of the urea, uric acid and ammonia in the urine, along with various other things that are passed out. It's the uric acid that causes the problem because apparently this is microscopic salt-like crystals that don't dissolve naturally. So they get kind of lodged in the structure of the fake grass in the plastic, and they can hang out there to smell. These are the same crystals that cause gout and kidney stones. They just don't seem to dissolve very well. And they get embedded in the layers of the artificial grass, and they smell better or worse depending on the weather. It can be pretty grim when it's hot, but also quite grim when it's cold as well, because that seems to accentuate the smell. And to get rid of the smell, you need something that is going to dissolve the crystals so the uric acid can disperse or drain away. Or you need something that will break it down, and that means a bacteria, something enzymatic or bacteria-based. In theory, bicarbonate of soda should help, as this changes the pH and neutralizes the uric acid. Heat is also supposed to help. So this means that a warm solution should be better than a cold solution. But unless you're doing this in the summer, I doubt the heat is going to be retained long enough to be helpful once you pour it onto the grass. And this then means that we're probably going to be looking at having to use a commercial product, which could be quite expensive in order to get rid of the smell. The problem that I have had is that everything you add involves adding liquid, and the whole grassy area is already very wet. So anything I add is diluted even further, and this has become a real problem. I also am concerned about letting the dogs on, even if I've used bicarbonate of soda, because that's quite alkaline in its pH. It wouldn't be a good thing for them to get on their feet if I didn't wash it off. And this means that if the grassy area is already wet and then I pour bicarbonate of soda solution on it, then I'm turning it into a watery surface that is going to potentially hurt their feet. Let's take a look at some of the comments and see what you thought. Have you got grass? Have you got fake grass? Or have you got a mud bath? Let's have a look. So Alison says, does it get too hot in the summer? Yes, it does get hot, but for me, it hasn't got too hot. Steve says the lawn turned from a lovely green oasis to a mud bath in 2 weeks. That's impressive, but yes, I can believe it. And you now have artificial. And David gives, all right, okay, so this isn't for the artificial grass, but a cup of milk before bedtime ends grass eating. Oh, that's interesting to know. Might be worth a try. Obviously, some greyhounds, well, all dogs are technically lactose intolerant, but then so are humans. It might be that a different type of milk without the lactose in could be worth a try if people are concerned about giving them milk. Lynn says she didn't have a problem with temperature, but did try to keep it shaded. Yeah, I found that they like it, the places that are hot. Even if I provide shady bits, they squeeze into the bits that are hot anyway. And the I'll Get What game says the bees love it. Yeah, this is not necessarily a good thing. We get the bees and also wasps coming to drink from the fake grass. And this means you are at risk of treading on them. So this is a little bit risky, actually. I've had trouble with them they come down and they seem to be drinking from the grass, even when it's quite dry. I don't know quite how. And I'm always worried the dog is going to roll over and roll onto one. Alison would rather have no grass as you have a racetrack outside. Yes, I've had a racetrack. It's fun, isn't it? And yes, Floppy seems to bypass the rinsing of the urine and just pee straight in the watering can at times. So he kind of, helps you out by weeing in the can. I think, okay, fair enough. At least I haven't got to rinse it away on the grass. It's already in the can. I can tip it straight down the sink, down the drain. An enzymatic cleaner, in theory, does help. There are enzymatic products. At the moment, I am primarily using a biological washing, a laundry liquid to pour on it in the hope that the enzymes in that will digest the bacteria. And if the problem is the uric acid crystals, they need to be enzymes that can break down those crystals, and whether they do that or not, I do not know. I've tried straight disinfectant in the form of Zoflora, and I found that the smell of urine combined with the smell of Zoflora made me feel quite ill, so I never did that again. I perhaps needed to look at a different perfume. There are loads and loads of different ones that you can get, and maybe mine just didn't go too well with the urine. But for me, that didn't get rid of it, it just masked it, and it didn't last very long either. So for me, that wasn't a good solution. Yeah, so Lynn's having her ecograss put down on Friday, I believe. And it does seem that there are different ways to do it. And it does sound as if you're going to have artificial grass fitted, it is worth asking quite a lot of questions about these issues that affect dog owners, and to ask the questions before you agree for them to come and do it, because there do seem to be different products and different ways of installing the product that could make a difference to your experience. What I wanted to talk about was whether it is really a good idea. There is quite a lot said now that it's not necessarily the best option for the environment. So you don't need the electricity to mow it, or in theory, you don't need to water it, but is it environmentally friendly? And I had a look online to see what I could find about this. And Plymouth University have got quite a lot of information about the downsides to artificial grass. I think as a dog owner, we can certainly see the upsides to it in getting rid of the mud, it being easy to clean, it not turning into a racetrack and so on. What about the downsides? One of the things that they are particularly keen to highlight is that it creates a barrier that doesn't provide food or access for living creatures. Burrowy insects and worms underneath need to be able to get to the top and the space above it, and the things that are at the top need to get through to come in. So although your artificial turf will have drainage holes in it, it does change the nature of the access to the surface that these insects and worms need. And it also creates a barrier that prevents plant material from being incorporated into the soil. So typically worms, even in your grass, not just in your borders, they would pull earth and plant material down into the soil. So they would help to improve the soil underneath the grass. And that's not going to happen in this situation, which means that there isn't a benefit to the soil underneath. And that might not seem like such a big deal because you might think, okay, I don't need the soil underneath to be improved. I think this is more thinking about if everybody has artificial turf instead of a natural lawn, it ends up being almost the equivalent of more concreting of the environment. I know there's been a big issue raised a while ago with people tending to concrete or tarmac over their driveways in order to park the car, or their front garden in order to park the car. And that's very understandable because if you can park off road, that has benefits. What they have found is that if you create a surface of that sort, it can change the water flow and it can actually lead to more flooding because the water doesn't go through, it runs off. And part of having good drainage comes from the action of the insects and the worms and so on in the soil that create a good tilth, which means that changing the surface and adding that barrier is going to affect those organisms in the soil. They claim that it also contributes to global warming because of it getting hot. Certainly, it does absorb more radiation than living grass and it displaces living plants that could remove carbon dioxide. So as a whole, across all the people using artificial turf across the planet, they are not contributing towards photosynthesis in the way that they would be if everyone had natural grass. It also has a larger carbon footprint through its whole life. Although it can now be recycled, this is a relatively recent thing, I think, from the research that I've done. It has got to be manufactured, which is going to contribute to carbon footprint. It's got to be transported, it's got to be installed, and then at the end of its life, even if you're going to recycle it, it has to be taken somewhere to be recycled. And this is bigger than the carbon footprint there would be if you had a natural lawn. So if that is important to you, then that is an issue. They also point out that if we replace soil from the base with sand and hardcore or rubble or whatever to create a stable bed surface beneath it, this releases more carbon dioxide that would otherwise be stored in the earth. And they also claim that it's more likely to cause surface runoff after rainfall that can contribute to flooding. And it's not as if you can aerate the soil underneath it, either by worm action or by you doing stuff, because you can't get to that surface anymore. So it's not really any different to the surface under paving slabs, for example. The soil is equally restricted from its relationship to the ground. They also think that the plastic bits in it contribute to microplastic pollution, which we're hearing a lot more about at the moment, about those very tiny bits that get absolutely everywhere, and no one has any idea of quite how damaging they are. But I know they have found them even in the internal organs of animals, including humans, and I think there is going to be potentially a big issue with this in the future because no one has any idea about what this is going to do as an impact later on. The shelf life of artificial grass is said to be 10 to 20 years, and it can be recycled, but it has to be done at specialist plants. I had a bit of a look online and I've identified some places. There are companies out there, so if you need to replace the grass that you've got with new grass, then there are companies you can contact in the UK at least in order to have it recycled. Whether or not they will accept grass that has been peed on for 10 years by dogs is another matter. That would be a conversation that I might try and have with one just out of interest. I think a lot of the recycling will be them taking all the sports pitches, because an awful lot of sports pitches now are artificial grass, and so after a period of time that needs to be replaced, and there's obviously an awful lot of artificial grass being taken out and replaced that can go for recycling in a way that in the past it would have gone to landfill. The grass does still need to be cleaned, And this means although you don't have to mow it, so if you would have used electricity to mow it or petrol to mow it, you now don't need that, but you might use power in order to vacuum it. I did vacuum mine a few times, but I find now it's rarely dry enough. I don't have a wet and dry vacuum, although I did wonder if that would be a good thing to buy for it, because then it would suck some of the extra moisture out. But if it's dry in the summer, yes, you can vacuum it to get all the bits and pieces off. Whether you want to have a separate one or the one you use for your carpets is obviously down to personal choice. But I definitely didn't want any extra yucky stuff going into my vacuum. And to that, I would add, in terms of the cleaning, you may well be pouring chemicals onto it to try and tackle the dog smell, which are not necessarily going to be any good for what's living under it or the things living around the edges. I know that I put a lot of stuff on mine, whether it's the bicarb of soda or following them around with a watering can with diluted laundry liquid in, or any of the commercial products you might buy. These are all things that are not typically poured onto soil, and that has to have an impact on the creatures that would otherwise have lived underneath. And I think, for my garden, that's only a small piece of the whole garden. But if you add it up over all the gardens with artificial grass, and I was reading this morning how having artificial grass has really, really taken off as a way of having an outdoor space that looks lovely all year round. It's not just a thing that dog owners do, it's something that a lot of people do. I do think maybe it was around in the past, maybe less so. I grew up being quite an avid gardener. I've always, until I got greyhounds, been very keen on my garden and tried to grow lots of plants I considered interesting. I do feel now there's much more of an emphasis on on gardens being an outdoor space for living in. So you might have a patio or a veranda or decking and outdoor furniture, and it becomes a living space rather than a place where you grow plants. And that is going to be so much more easily maintained for many people who perhaps aren't that interested in gardening but want to enjoy that space if they have artificial turf alongside the decking and the patio set and all the rest of it. So there does seem to be an increase in the use of artificial turf from what I've been reading, and we have to think about the environmental impact of that. And last but not least, it's not cool and tactile like walking on real grass. There is something really special about walking on a well-kept grassy lawn. Though I totally agree that if you have greyhounds, you might need to have a very separate piece of grass to do this on. I know before COVID hit us, I used to do workshops once a year at a local education centre, and we would do some stuff outside, walking around on the grass in our bare feet. They had a labyrinth cut into the grass, which was lovely to go and walk in bare feet, and the feeling of that grass beneath your feet is really quite special. Well, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. Those of you who have artificial grass, those of you who are thinking about it, those of you who are thinking, I'd like it, but I'm not sure if it's a good idea for the environment. Let me know what your thoughts are if you haven't already. I do think from what I've been reading, it has moved on a lot in the last few years. It may well be that grass you had installed 10 years ago is very different to the grass you might have installed now. Certainly, I have seen some suppliers online who are saying that they're able to install a grass that's more dog friendly. They're able to install a grass that doesn't have as many questionable components, plastic, chemicals in it. And in one case, I found one who was actually producing grass from recycled grass. So it wasn't even that they were having to use new plastic, because this is another issue, that it is quite often made from virgin plastic. Barbara's got to go. Thank you for coming, Barbara. See you again soon. Lynn's recommending odor kill. So those of you who are interested in how to make it smell better, you could try odor kill. And Zoflora, daily. Yeah, I don't think I have the energy to do it daily. I chase mine around with a watering can and try and spot clean the bits that they wee on. It is quite an ongoing job. And in that respect, you could say, oh, well, if I was doing the lawn, I would only mow it once a week. Do I want to chase around having to look after my artificial turf every week, every day? David says, what if you took a steel rod and poked some holes in some key places? You could try. You probably have to hammer it in. The grass itself does have drainage through it, but you're not going to be able to go round with a fork and actually make holes in the way that you could if it was real grass. And Aurora Violet Light has artificial grass and bark, which helps with the mud. Yeah, the mud is just a nightmare. So any other comments on that, please let me know. Pop those in the chat. And overall, if you have enzymatic grass, has it been worthwhile? On balance, would you do it again? Knowing what you know now, let me know. I'm going to move on to my next subject, and if there are any more comments on that, I'll come back to those. And my last subject for today is toys. I see a lot of comments around greyhound play, often people saying they wish their greyhound played more. And I thought it would be interesting to talk just a little about the sorts of toys our greyhounds like. Mine have all been very different in their preferences. And thinking about my current greyhounds, there are a number of favourites. When it comes to balls, tennis balls, rubber balls, any types of balls, Maggie and AJ rarely pay any attention. Maggie will sometimes play with a football if I happen to have one, but smaller balls that would fit in her mouth and squeak, totally not interested. However, Jim and Floppy love tennis balls and rubber balls of that size. They like to chase them if I throw them, which is not something Maggie and AJ tend to do at all. I don't do this too much because, of course, repeated ball changing is not always good for dogs of any sort, but just a few times seems to be fun for them. Gandalf, on the other hand, has a strong preference for one specific blue ball, and you might have watched his short about it recently. He knows the difference between that ball and even one that, as far as I'm concerned, is identical, that I bought to replace it with because it was getting tatty and, of course, is not having it. And I'm not looking forward to the day that it finally dies. He is going to be bereft. He will, however, play with some Aldi glow-in-the-dark balls that I got, but he rarely shows any interest in a tennis ball. So he is quite particular in his preference for how a ball is going to look and kind of the mouthfeel of the ball. If he plays with other balls, they tend to also be rubbery in their surface texture, rather like his blue ball. None of mine have any real interest in rope toys. I do have a few, but pretty much they are a complete waste of money for my lot. I have had some in the past who would play with a rope toy, mainly chewing through it and turning it into fluff, not doing anything like tugging with it or chasing it. But Maggie might chew one. They'll settle down and start gnawing on it. With plushes, AJ would play quite nicely given the chance. Jim and Floppy are not that bothered, while Gandalf and Maggie can choose one and destroy it in minutes. And Gandalf has prepared a sample for me. We got this snake in Aldi because it seemed like a good option. It has no small parts that stick out. It's got no ears, no legs. Can you see my snake? I'm holding it up. I hope you can see my snake. And ears, noses, long fur, all disastrous. And it lasted nearly a week before he decided to disembowel it. Some of the bits came out down the side, a lot of it came out here at the back of the head. He removed it from the body first, and then the squeak fell out. We have all the stuffing. Oh yes, saved it all up from the disemboweled snake. The squeak fell out, but as you can hear, there's still some rustly plastic in it, which has stayed in place, and he does like that. Then he took the brains out the head. However, I've saved it all up, and it's now relegated to the toy hospital for repairs. I'm going to wash it first because I really don't like sewing up disgusting, stinky chew toys. But once it's been through the wash, I'll stitch it up again and we'll have another go. But this took him a week to get through, which is pretty impressive for him. I've known him kill things completely in maybe 5 minutes. If that, he settles down and he starts gnawing on maybe an ear or a leg or a tail or something like that, any small bits, and off it goes. And then he'll maybe try to swallow them. I'm going to put that snake back over there, back in the toy hospital. And then it's a disaster. But AJ, he would quite happily sit and play nicely with a toy like that. So I feel a bit sorry for AJ, really, because anything that he might like tends to have to be hidden away because Gandalf is going to kill it. I do find that it's easier to just repair them and start again because they kill them so quickly that it gets really quite expensive. It's more cost effective to buy a bag of squeaks, which you can do on Amazon or eBay or somewhere, and pop a new squeak in if you want one and sew them up with the stuffing, pop back in, rather than keep buying new toys. So let me know in the comments, what is your dog's favourite toy? Do they like plushes? Do they like balls? Do they like tennis balls or plastic balls? Do they like rope toys? What do they like to play with, if anything? Or are they one of those kind of guys that doesn't necessarily like to play with toys at all? And I'm going to have a swig of my water because I'm getting a bit dry. So what have we got? Emma likes her light ball. Is that one that glows in the dark, Alison? Naddie likes a rope toy. Skip throws them around and Sam's not that bothered. And Naddie's the one that can be disruptive. Yes. And Sid likes a large Kong ball and the reindeer Kong that squeaks. And the giant caterpillar. Yes, a few of you with Cleo the caterpillar. Lynn likes the Kong Knots toys. Expensive but strong. Yes, I've got some of the Kong teddy bears that seem to have a knotted rope inside. They are pretty well. So far, I think they've survived. We might have lost the odd ear or finger on like the ends of the legs or so, but we're not doing too badly with those. And Steve says he loves his Cleo the caterpillar and the fox and the goose. And Spamalot has a toy surgery and keep the squeakers. The squeakers are good if you can get them. If you don't get them in time, they get chewed and then you need a new one. I find sometimes the squeaker dies before it gets disemboweled, and therefore you can make the toy much more excited by putting a new squeaker in it. I'm interested to see your comments on Cleo the caterpillar. I tried Cleo. I had 2 of them and I ended up giving them away to someone who had less destructive dogs than me because they lasted literally minutes and they got badly savaged and I had to do a lot of sewing up. They lost their antennae almost immediately. That was the little pointy bit that got taken out. The person that gave me one of them said, oh, well, they've been fine. The eyes aren't a problem, because I would be concerned about those plastic eyes in case they were chewed out and swallowed. And of course, mine probably started trying to chew the eyes, and I had to take the eyes out and replace them with stitched eyes. And then the antennae came off, and then they started chewing on the bit in the middle. For mine, play is mostly about dismantling plushy toys. They aren't interested in me playing with them with the toy. They might be a bit interested if I shake it, but by and large, they want to take it off somewhere and chew pieces off, which is just their idea of fun. And that means that the interest for them is really with a new toy, something novel that they can disembowel, dissect, and then lose interest in. So let's have a look at the comments or questions in the chat. Anything else about toys? Do yours end up looking like my toys? Have you got Cleo? Has Cleo worked? Has Cleo survived? I see pictures on Facebook of dogs cuddled up with Cleo in their crate or in their bed, and it's like, oh, that looks so sweet. But it doesn't happen in my house. Alison found Cleo was a waste of money. Was that because Emma ate Cleo or because she didn't like Cleo? I can't read that. Where's that thing? Alison took the eyes and small bits out. Yeah, that's why I chose the snake, because I thought that it had, I mean, you can see he's pulled on this fluffy bit. But it had, some of the others in this range had ears or arms and legs and stuff. And I thought, well, there's not much on this that he can destroy. So we took the brains out the back of the head instead. But okay, that was fun. He enjoyed it. And we'll stitch it all up, put another squeaker in, and he can do it again. So any more thoughts about toys? Let me know in the comments. That's my third and final subject. So I'm going to wrap this up. I apologize again for the problems at the start, and if any of you got lost where I ended up cancelling that first live stream and setting it up again, I hope you've managed to join us in the replay later on. If you've enjoyed this month's Bits and Pieces, please do support the channel. You can use the super chat or super thanks button for a one-off contribution or a donation on any of the videos and the shorts. And of course, to get more of the same each month, please also consider becoming a channel member. If you have ideas of things you'd like me to talk about in future, then pop them in the comments. And if you haven't already done so, please click like, because we like to have likes. We'll be back again in April for Hot Topics, first of all, followed by the Superfan members session on the third Monday of the month, and that one is going to be on advocating for your dog. The Hot Topics next month, I thought I would talk about going on holiday with your dog, having just been away with Greyhounds, and of course a lot of people are just revving up to thinking about holidays soon. So I thought that might be a good topic to talk about next time. And I'm not sure yet what Bits and Pieces will be on in April, but I'm sure things will come to me as we get nearer the time. I like to leave that one till it's nearer the time, so I can see what I feel like talking about when it comes round. So keep an eye on the community post for more information, and I hope you can join me for one or more of those sessions. And we will be back again in April. Have a lovely Easter weekend. Look out for the short on Friday. We've done a nice little Easter short for you, which I've just set up to come out this Friday, which is Good Friday. Whether you celebrate Easter or just enjoy the chocolate, I hope you enjoy our short on Friday. And then we'll have something else for you on Easter Monday as normal. So that's all for this time. I'm going to end the live stream now, and I will see you again in a couple of weeks. Not that long this time. Bye for now, everyone.